Hi everybody, it's Lisa. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to my sewing layer. Up on the board I have a baby quilt. I pinched it from Quilter's Cash. It's called New Waterwheel. It's a free pattern. I just made part of the pattern and I added a border to it, which is my border. It has two blocks. They are both 9 patches. One is called a water wheel block, which is basically 4 half square triangles, a center 9 patch, and then 2 light, dark, light strip units for the middle blocks. And each of the patches finish at 3. They're cut at 3.5, and the total blocks finish at 9. The star blocks are made in the pattern. It's made from a template. I think that a star block like this, which is made with the V block, is what Deb Tucker calls them, as the star points. They're also called peaky and spike, and it's also called a triangle and a square. It's a very, very versatile block that allows you to do a lot of cool stuff. So I would recommend that you purchase a ruler to make these wonderful, wonderful blocks in many sizes. And of course you could use the template, but I think you're depriving yourself of an excellent way to make these. I recommend Deb Tucker's V block if I had to buy one ruler, and I think that you'll have very good results with that, and you will have multiple sizes. The fabric in the quilt is the floral pattern is from Nancy Ring's Colores collection, and I just love it. It's a really pretty collection. I had a white background and I used this really pretty periwinkle that went perfectly with the colors in the print, and I got that just from my stash. I had bought some Hancock's of Paducah mystery solids. It's a Kaufman mystery solid. I have no idea what color it is, but the fun thing about those mystery packs is you can find a color that will match anything in your stash, which is pretty cool. And it's a good value. I used a couple of techniques and tools in addition to the ruler that I told you about that I also wanted to share with you. Number one, when I do my binding, I machine bind everything. I will never I don't hand sew, I don't hand quilt, I don't enjoy it, and will not ever do it. So I am 100% machine all the way. So I am putting my binding on from the back and then moving it over to the front. My binding is 2.5 inches wide. I had been using a 2.25, but I've made a little tweak. I'm cutting my binding back to 2.5 inches, and what I'm doing is I am cutting 1/8 of an inch outside of the quilt top. Then when I make my first pass for attaching the binding, I am actually using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then what that gets me is like, so what, Lisa? Why the hell are you doing something like that? Well, I'm doing it that way because it gets me to the front of the quilt with less force. At 2.25 inch and using a 1/4 inch seam, it seemed just like I was fighting to get a really super tight binding and get my seam covered adequately. So I tried this method, and I think it's the method that I will continue to use. It gets me back to the same starting point. I'm just fighting it a little bit less. The second thing I did on my binding is that I glued everything all the way around, and I mitered my corners using this wonderful tool, which is this hot hammer ruler, and you will get a beautiful tight corner using that to get a perfect 45, and then hitting it with your iron to have really sharp creases. So I highly recommend that. But I glued everything all the way around, so I basically dry fitted it, and then I rather than just leaving my tails and finishing my tails after I sewed the binding on, I actually finished it while it was still glued on. And what that allowed me to do was, if it was too tight, you know how hard it is to kind of fight and get your final join if you're doing a mitered join, which is what I do. I was just able to rip out some of the glue if I needed some more space, make my mitered cut using my Creative Grids folded corner clipper, and I like to make that cut a little bit short. So if I've got a 2 1/4, 2.5 inch binding, I cut it at like 2 1/4. And what that gave me is a taut but not tight final join, so you don't end up with any flaccidness or wrinkles in it. So give that a try when you're mitering your borders, your final binding join. Give that a try, and I think that you'll be very happy with it. So just a wee bit short, wee bit skinny. The other thing that I did was I used some fusible binding for bringing after I had attached it and bringing my binding forward to the front, I ironed it down nicely using fusible webbing, and that worked beautifully. But before that, after I attached my binding, I ran it through the serger, and what that gives you is a beautifully encapsulated seam with no raw edges, no threads that are poking this way and that, and I was really happy with that. So I'm going to start adapting that. And of course I had to get my serger set up. I haven't used it in a while, but it was a great way to do that. And then the final thing that I did is, both for my quilting as well as my my binding, I bought a new foot for my Juki Kiri, and I'm going to show that to you. This foot works with the Smart Feed system, and what that allows is the Smart Feed foot to come through in this. So it doesn't come standard with the machine. The second thing that it has is, because it's an edge stitch foot, it has an edge right here, and depending on where you're working on the binding, you're typically working from the right side. You will want your needle to go however many clicks you want to be, so that this is lined up with the edge of your binding, and that your needle is coming a little bit to the right to catch that edge perfectly. So what this allows you to do is line up the edge right here. It brings the front of your eyes, your focal point, ahead of the foot, and it's a lot easier on your eyes, and you're just letting this guide ride right on that edge. This Smart Feed foot will go right back here. So this was really worth its weight in gold. And secondly, you can use it for stitching in the ditch. In this particular case, you would want your needle directly behind the guide, or experiment with your machine to get it lined up correctly, and that will get you mostly stitching in the ditch. And I found that, again, it's bringing your eye in front, and it's a little easier to see rather than focusing on the foot. And that's all I have to tell you about that. I was really happy with how this turned out. You can see I've got a really nice stitch, right there from the edge. And this is what it looks like on the back. Now, remember, if this were perfectly balanced, okay, if this were perfectly balanced, this would be a little bit more over here. But I'm happy with this. It's not very noticeable at all. Again, everyone's got their own preferences, and that might not be, you know, something that you would like to see, but it's fine. It's fine with me because it's really not noticeable, and my thread is always going to match the back of my quilt. Alrighty, well, if you like the pattern, I hope that you'll give it a look. And remember, if you like that star block, to consider getting Deb Tucker's ruler. It'll really help you make it speedily and accurately. Thanks for joining me today, and find something joyful to work on. Bye.